Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I look forward to asking you some questions around Kairos and the assessment and just how that's played out with your experience. What stood out to you the most about your Kairos results, and how has that insight impacted the way that you work or communicate?
So learning about Kairos, I can tell you what stood out for me the most at the beginning was realizing where I was on the reader scale. I'll tell you about that because I didn't know who Francis Hopper was. I'm kind of glad I didn't know he was like kind of world renowned in what he does. And so I actually got the results back and I said, this is nice, but it's not right. And he said, how do you mean? And I said, well, I'm a great reader. And I go, I'm actually a great reader. You can look at my SAT scores. I did great on reading. He goes, this doesn't assess your reading comprehension. Like I was almost arrogant about it, right? And I'm embarrassed to say it. He said, this doesn't test your reading comprehension. This test, he goes, let me ask it another way. How long can you read before you find yourself reading over the same page and you realize you hadn't progressed in any way? About 35 minutes. And he goes, it doesn't stimulate you cognitively. And I went, oh my gosh, you just explained all of medical school to me in one sentence. And then he had me. What was noticeable has evolved as my understanding of what it was assessing evolved. The first time you see it, you don't quite understand what is sequential and what is associative. And the more experience you get with it, it becomes clearer and clearer. So what stood out with me first about my Kairos results was realizing, wow, this test actually owned me. It's exactly who I am. And it explains a lot about the struggles I've had and the advantages I might have had. And so that's what stood out. In mine, I noticed that, for example, I'm low on reading, like in 30. It doesn't stimulate me as far as cognitively, but I also realized that I'm decidedly sequential. I'm decidedly prone to moving. And so, you don't want to paint yourself into a corner, but it really realized I'm setting myself up for failure when I'm in loud environments. How can I control my environment so I can be the most productive version of myself? And so that's how it impacted me. I realized that I'm best doing short segments of work, isolated in my thing. I'm easily distractible. So it's like, my team knows, one thing at a time. I'm an excellent machete. I'm not such a good Swiss Army knife. Don't give me 10 things at once. And I've become far more effective that way. And also there's been less tension in a lot of my interpersonal or work relationships because I can say, look, this is how I work best. I also found when I go into a meeting that's going to be longer than 45 minutes, I've coached myself to say, hey, everybody, somewhere in this meeting, I'm likely going to get up and walk around. It is not because I'm not interested. I am far better for you if I do that a little bit. There's a lot of other people in the room and say, me too. So what stood out was, one, when you really understood what it's assessing, it makes a lot of sense. And then it helps you just to understand how to adapt your environment to make you the most productive and effective.
Strengths and weaknesses come out of the same well. You may have heard Francis describe that to you. What makes it easy to do one thing makes it harder to do another. So reading that you described as there's a certain challenge to it and that it's not cognitively stimulating. The pro is you are going to retain that text typically as you go through. And that's where, you're an excellent reader and there's so many others like you. Kind of underscored the machete. I like that analogy, machete versus the Swiss Army knife. Yeah. Can you kind of dig into that a little bit more? Are you describing the sequential when you say machete?
I think so. Yes, I think I am.
Okay.
So it's interesting. The beauty of this is it's not like you're tied to it or you're damned by it. I mean, the reality is that, you give me a really interesting novel and I can read all day sometimes, right? If you need it, you can still do it. It just tells you on the average day at the average time how you're going to best be able to produce. And so the machete part was that my thought process is very sequential. You have to kind of learn how much cognitive energy you have, at a given time. I found that I'm much better at doing a high level stuff in the morning, et cetera. And so we actually kind of understand now cognitively that really human beings don't multitask. They're better rapid refocusers or not, right? Like you do it, you can stop, you can break, you can stop, you can break, you can stop, you can break. And I found that I am typically the best if you give me, do this one, bop, 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 till I'm done. This one, bop, 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 till I'm done. And so how I work in the operating room is exactly like that. I can look, think, do, and then we go do. I have found that, when my team comes and talks to me, oftentimes a lot of people based on their preferences will communicate differently, and they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, I got to ask you about these things. Okay, perfect. What do we think we're going to do about this case? Mr. So-and-so has the mitral regurgitation. Awesome. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, well, let's talk about it. I used to feel guilty that I wasn't able to jump, and now I'm like, no, trust me. This is how you want me. pause on that one. We'll get to it. And now most people who work with me will say, even my partner who's sitting right over here will be like, okay, you're right, I forgot. So I just found that I'm much better. If you give me the first task, I drive it to the end, second task, drive it to the end. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that is the case. I'm also not locked to it. You can be that. And also I'm actually a high listener, high observer, high talker, high mover. I remember saying to Francis one time, like my day job is I'm an interventional cardiologist. I work in a room with a team with a frequently changing situation based on hemodynamics and cardiovascular physiology, to where it's stable, unstable. They're coming in often with a heart attack. And so you're a lot like air traffic control. And so the point is a lot of that, especially in what we call a code or a code blue, when someone comes in cardiopulmonary arrest, that you have to navigate a lot. And the reality is that it's like, I'm actually, I'm good at hearing it. I'm good at sending it out and then going back to the sequential. None of us are one-dimensional human beings. So it's really been a wonderful evolution to learn how it works well with me. I told Francis one time, I said, this is what I do. Can you believe I chose to be an interventional cardiologist? And he said, you didn't. Interventional cardiology chose you. And I was like, you're exactly right.
He always throws in those one-liners.
I know it.
So has there been anything specific that's kind of changed your approach to leadership and medicine and the way that you work and do things? A lot of this stuff is probably like, oh, I kind of already knew this about myself. Kind of paints a clear picture as, what we've heard from some of our clients, and they say, I wish I knew this stuff 20 years ago. It's not that you didn't really know it. It's you have this language to describe yourself in a different way. And it seems like it gives you permission to do certain things, which is just crazy to me that, I'm in my 30s and I say the same thing. Like, why didn't we learn this, 15, 20 years ago in school? Would have been a lot more enjoyable.
Honestly, it's be like reading, writing, arithmetic, and cognitive preferences, or actually cognitive preferences, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? I completely agree with you. And it's interesting, the wording you said there, like kind of to give yourself permission to do this. Like everybody wins. They get the best of you that way when you actually had to do it. And the reality is, have you ever, maybe rarely, but I've never actually had anyone challenge me back when I say it, because it's so intuitively obvious to them. Even if they're different, they're like, yeah, I've seen people like that, but I'm not like that. When I say, listen, I'm going to stand up, even the ones that Francis called the iron chairs, whatever the percentage of people who can sit for hours and hours and hours, and they always say, oh yeah, you're like my brother. No one challenges it. They're almost like great to accept it. They're glad you said it, And so I think it's innately human, and yet it's odd that we learn it awkwardly almost, or delayed, as if it's some exception when it's the rule. As far as dealing with people, there's been, I'd say, at least 3 great things that came from it. The first thing is, when I was in grad school, you teach stuff. I was a physical chemistry teacher in grad school, and I remember when you start doing teaching, they teach you that, people learn in different ways. Some people are good tactile, some people are good readers, some people are good listeners, some people whatever else. And we talk about teaching that way, and yet it stops there. We don't carry it on to the rest of life. We all communicate via email or via the same mechanism. What this has really taught me was learn the members of your team, learn their preferred mechanism of communication, and then make it one-time communication, knowing that like the people I work with know I don't like reading stuff like that. So like, if you can't do it in about 2 sentences, then you just call me. And that works way better. And that doesn't work one way, that works 2 ways. I can show the same respect to my team on how they pick things up the best way. So that's the actual action, or one of the changes. But the better layer below that is to say, I realize that far less often is it that they're a bad person and I'm a good person, or they're disrespectful and I'm respectful, or I listen and they don't listen. It's that they see the world or hear the world or interpret the world a little bit different than I do. And when you have a little bit of understanding that, you realize that you're right, I'm right, we're different. And that changes a lot. That really has helped a lot with our team, because our team even kind of knows, oh yeah, it's Harvey, do it like this. And it's not disrespectful, it's respectful in how they do that. And then there's a second part that comes to that. You do that. And then when you actually really do try to do that, let's be honest, in the world of human-human interaction, sometimes there's a bad fit on your team. Sometimes there's someone who doesn't share their values or whatever else. Understanding that actually becomes easier, because it's not the other stuff. And so it's had such profound changes on our group and our organization.
It sounds like there was a revelation in this. In having the assessment results, you saw that, okay, there's certain things that are going to favor the way that I perform. And there's certain things that are naturally going to help my colleagues. And so there's these questions that we can ask. Did those questions arise after you got the results? And was it easier to favor your cognitive stance?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that they were faults in me before I saw the results. I thought my inability to be able to read as much as I should was a matter of I wasn't disciplined or something else like that. And so I thought I should be able to do that. And then I realized I wasn't. It almost empowered me to be like, okay, it's just how I am. So it was a revolution. It very much made us aware of something I was not aware of before. It wasn't shocking when I saw it. It just was shocking that it wasn't necessarily something to be blamed for. It's just how you're wired.
Right. So is there anything you would say to physicians maybe that haven't taken the assessment yet? How would you describe the assessment? I describe it in a certain way. Frank describes it in a certain way. I'm curious to hear how you would describe it. No pressure.
Yeah, I hear you. I would describe the test as the first and accurate assessment that describes the ways you're the most functional. We've all taken aptitude tests, or you take a test and say, it looks like you'd be a good chemist or a good whatever, or you're probably should be considered being this or whatever else. And this is not that. It's not an aptitude test. It's a test that tells you, that at least reveals to you the ways that your brain prefers to be the most functional or prefers to work best. And that's like nothing I'd ever seen before. And you think you have because you've taken all these things. Most of us have done stuff like this. And those tests have validity, but this is a different test. This test basically assesses or gives you feedback to the ways your brain is best set to perform or prefers to perform best. And it's not intuitive. I mean, the results are intuitive when you see it, but it's nothing I could have come up with. I would have going to come up on my own.
Sure.
And the only other thing I'd say is it's a little bit like, it's like reading a profound work, reading the Bible or something. Like every time, the more you get into it, the more you learn. There's some innate things you're going to get right out of the gate. But actually, it was 6 months or a year in before I really started, longer, 2 years in before I really started understanding the power, because I started understanding what it was really telling me.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, thanks so much for joining me today, and everybody listening and watching this. Thank you for tuning in. And if you have not taken the Kairos assessment, you can take the assessment at kairoscognition.com. Dr. Harvey, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.